The other day I was talking to one of my brothers and I was reminded of a story, and this is kind of a goofy story, but it's funny. I used to have an M35A2 deuce and a half Army truck, big old Army truck. This thing was huge, and it was a diesel. It was actually multi-fuel, but it ran on diesel for the most part. That's what I put into it. And I had this thing as just a toy, a very, very heavy toy, about as heavy as a house, but it was a lot of fun. And huge ground clearance, all three axles drove, so you could go anywhere. It had a winch, so you could never get stuck. And if you wanted to pull like trees out or houses off their foundations, this truck would have done it if you had put it to such a task. And so every summer, for a couple summers, I would take it up north with my brothers. We used to do bike trips where we'd all get together and we'd all meet in Copper Harbor and go ride mountain bikes around for a few days and just, bounce around out in the woods and scream and yell at the top of our lungs because it was fun to do. And so a couple of years I brought my Army truck up there and I'd throw my mountain bike in the back, drive my Army truck up I-75 and then across the Upper Peninsula to Copper Harbor and hang out. And of course the trip was always an adventure. That truck would do 55 miles an hour, but it was very noisy because it had a cloth roof and a diesel stack right there. And the road noise from those 10 tires was enormous. I actually soundproofed it to some extent by putting stuff down and then carpeting inside the passenger compartment, but that eliminated 1% of the noise. And for instance, I remember one time driving up north on 75 and found myself driving alongside a bunch of National Guardsmen in their deuces and halves and pulled into a rest area, and all of a sudden all these trucks pulled in behind me, and we were all getting out admiring each other's trucks. And some guy goes, "Yeah, I knew that you weren't part of the guard. Your truck looks too nice," because I just recently painted it. But anyway, I go all the way up there. I'm driving by myself. I go all the way up there, and someplace near a little town called Chassell, there's a gas station, and I'm going to buy gas. And so I pull up to the diesel pumps, and I'd never seen this before down where I lived, but they had diesel pumps, and they had Diesel 1 and Diesel 2. And I know it sounds a lot like a Dr. Seuss story, but there are different grades of diesel, and they are primarily, the distinction is that one is better in cold weather and one is better in warm weather. And one costs more, one I believe costs less. And I also believe that it wouldn't hurt anything to use the wrong one, but if you found yourself paying for the more expensive stuff and you didn't need to, why would you do that? This thing had a 50-gallon tank. So I'm looking at these pumps, and I can't remember now what the distinction is between Diesel 1 and Diesel 2, because I'd never encountered that before. And I don't believe I had a smartphone at the time. I don't think we had them then, or if we did, I didn't have one. And so I go into the gas station, and there's a woman behind the counter, and there's a little table over here. It's a table about this tall, and it's got stools around it. And there's three guys sitting on stools at this table. And they're drinking coffee. And it turns out that the gas station had one of these deals where, you get free refills. So these local guys would wander over, buy one cup each, and sit there all morning long. And so I say to the nice lady behind the counter, I say, "Excuse me, I got a question for you. I need to buy a tank of diesel. Can you tell me which one it is that I should be buying right now because it's summertime? And you got Diesel 1 and Diesel 2, and I forgot which one is which." And she goes, "I don't know. I haven't been paying attention to what the guys have been buying because truck drivers would stop by there and buy gas." And she goes, "But one of these guys would know." And I go, "Oh, okay." And so I go walking over there, and again, three local guys. I go, "Excuse me, gentlemen, I have a question for you." And they look at me because I'm an outsider. They've never seen me before. And they're very skeptical of me, of course. And I said, "Guys, I've got that truck out there," and I point. And I need to buy diesel. And I always forget Diesel 1 or Diesel 2. Which one is the winter fuel and which one's the summer, ideally? And the guy goes, "That's your truck?" And I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Let's go outside." So this guy goes out there with me. I assume he wants to see my truck. We go walking towards my truck. He goes, "Where are you going?" I go, "I'm going up to Copper Harbor." He goes, "Where are you from?" I go, "The Detroit area." He goes, "They don't want that truck in Copper Harbor. You can't do that." I go, "Dude, it's just a pickup truck. I'm going to Copper Harbor. I go there every single summer. I got friends up there. I'm meeting family up there. I'm going to Copper Harbor." And he goes, you can't bring this truck to Copper Harbor." And he keeps insisting that I can't and I shouldn't bring my truck to Copper Harbor because they don't want that up there. And I go, dude, the truck is street legal. What makes you think they don't want it there? And this guy was just being a weirdo, but it wasn't an act. He was a legitimate weirdo. He goes, they don't want this truck up there. Don't go. And I go, do you know which diesel it is? Is it diesel 1 or diesel 2? Which one's winter diesel? And the guy goes, you shouldn't go to Copper Harbor. So I start walking back towards the gas station. He goes, where are you going? I go, I'm going to ask one of your friends if they know. And he goes, oh, diesel 1 is winter. But don't go to Copper Harbor. I don't know why a guy who lives in Chassell, which is more than an hour away from Copper Harbor, didn't want me to take my truck to Copper Harbor. And he kept insisting, he spoke for the people of Copper Harbor, they don't want your truck there. The truck, it's not like it spewed fumes or leaked fluids. It's just a big old truck. And by the way, there were RVs at the campground twice as big as my truck, I assure you. So they don't mind you bringing your vehicle to Copper Harbor if you're not breaking the law with it. And I never broke the law with it. We drive it around on logging roads and stuff, but you're perfectly allowed to do that. You know, they don't want this truck there. So anyway, I drove up to Copper Harbor, had a great time with my brothers, told them this story endlessly. It became a running joke. Oh, they don't want that in Copper Harbor. And I drove it home. And that was the end of that summer, right? So the next year, I'm going to bring the truck back up again. And I fill it up in the Detroit area, and I drive north, and I'm approaching Chassell. I thought, you know, I'm going to stop here and get some gas. So I pull in, and I go walking inside, and I see the same 3 guys standing around that table. And I go up to the woman, I say, hi, how you doing? And she goes, oh, how are you? And I said, do you remember me? And she's, oh, you're the guy with the army truck. And she goes, I do remember you. I go, I noticed those 3 guys haven't left yet. Like as if they'd been there the whole year, you know? And she goes, oh, you don't get it, do you? I go, what's that? And she goes, we took away their stools and they still won't leave. Then I realized the guys were standing around that table. And they came in the morning, bought the 1 cup of coffee, and stood at that table. And I said, when did that happen? And she goes, I told my boss that these guys are bothering me. They're bothering customers. But they come in, they buy the coffee, and they just stand there and drink it. She goes, pretty soon we're going to get rid of the table. And it's kind of funny because I've lived in other small towns. I've mentioned I lived in Bad Axe. I lived in Eau Claire, Michigan. I've lived in small towns. And small towns are a totally different thing. And don't get me wrong, there are weirdos everywhere. There are weirdos among us, okay? But the guy who was trying to tell me not to take my truck to Copper Harbor, he was, by the way, he was at that table. He didn't see me, or at least he didn't say anything to me. But he's a little more prominent because he's a weirdo in a small town. And he has no problem speaking his mind to people. So they all know that, oh, yeah, he's just a local weirdo, or one of the local weirdos. So I'm sure they have more than one. But the guy was insistent that I shouldn't take my truck to Copper Harbor because they don't want that up there. And he's not from Copper Harbor. Weirdest thing. But I had a lot of fun with that truck. That's one of the goofier stories. But again, like I said, the only time I encountered the Diesel 1, Diesel 2 thing was at gas stations in the UP. Because the gas stations down near where I lived, as far as I know, they just have diesel. But in the Upper Peninsula, winter diesel might be a little more valuable, a little more useful. So I'm sure that's what's going on there. But then about a year or two later, I sold the truck, and a guy out east bought it, and he refurbished it, and he fixed the top so that it had the full troop carrier covering on the back, which I never had for it. And he sent me some pictures of the truck in a couple parades he had it in, which is always fun because I had mine in a parade too. But I don't have pictures of that, sadly. But I do have photographs. If I can dig them up, I'll show them. But a friend of mine sent me a photograph of the house I lived in at the time, taken from space. Of course, you know, Google Earth view, not quite space, but I'm joking. And you could see my truck from space because that's how big it was. So anyway, that just reminded me of the guy telling me I can't take my truck to Copper Harbor because they don't want me there. And more importantly, They took away the men's chairs, and they still would stand there all day. Questions or comments? Put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.